this next gentleman is the trade attorney for that organization, and it has taken some time, but now those manufacturers understand why it's important to support you, because they now realize you're producing their food. And so, for example, right now we have manufacturers making phone calls to their U.S. senators urging them to join the Senator Round's mandatory country of origin labeling for beef leather. And so I'm going to welcome back Charles Benoit. He's an experienced trade attorney and is representing clients on international trade issues in federal court and before the United States International Trade Commission, as well as advocacy for trade enforcement before the United States Trade Representative. Charles was one of 3 American attorneys hired as an outside counsel by the European Commission to advise on U.S. law for European transatlantic trade and investment partnership negotiations. And prior to that, Charles worked as in-house counsel for General Electric, supporting GE's engagement on trade policy and helping GE businesses navigate Buy America procurement rules. Charles received his bachelor's degree from the University of Western Ontario and his law degree from Georgetown University. While at Georgetown, Charles interned as the Canadian Embassy supporting its trade policy officers and was accepted as a student fellow from Georgetown Law's Institute of International Economic Law. Prior to that, prior to law school, Charles lived and worked abroad in Canada, India, and France, and he's got his lovely wife with him and 3 wonderful children joining us at the convention. Charles, and it took me like 2 years to pronounce his name correctly, Charles Benoit. And Charles, please come to the stage. And in the meantime, you'll learn that Charles has been instrumental in helping us initiate a trade investigation in the sheep industry. So Charles, it's yours. Thank you.
So I'm thrilled to be back, and I'm feeling a little vindicated too. Last year when I was here, I said I was a bit cautious coming to a group that faced so many policy wrongs and coming with an optimistic message, but I felt it was warranted. And since then, in the time since last year, we've had a lot of incredible developments, and I actually think that this month, June 2024, is going to be perhaps one of the most seminal moments in U.S. history of the trade policy. So, see if I can get these slides up. Oops, let me go back. So this was Friday morning, just this past Friday, broadcast on hotel lobbies and conference rooms in airports all across the country. Could tariffs replace an income tax? We have not had this discussion in 100 years. And it's been, well, you already got the taste of why did this happen? President Trump visited Capitol Hill and made this pitch. How Congress responds to this pitch, I think the future of the country rides on it. Now, I want to tell you a bit about how you should think about tariffs. I didn't cover this last year because I think it's going to be so important when you talk to your legislators. So tariffs are ancient. Okay, they go back as far as writing goes back. You can go back 5,000 years, and we have tariff rates written on clay tablets. I say tariffs birthed civilization. This is how you have to think about it. We would not have civilization without tariffs. Tariffs were, what you have to do, step 1 is have a border. We all know about the importance of borders here. I don't need to tell you that. And we have the rule that merchandise imports have to come through specific ports of entry, okay? That makes assessing a tariff super easy. If everything has to come through a port, it's very easy to assess the tax on it. You compare that to an income tax where you have to learn everything about your personal life. You have to, how many children did you have this year? Did you get married? Did you get divorced? To tell all your expenses. You have to give all that information to the government. None of that with tariffs. Tariffs are the only federal revenue. We don't need a domestic police force. You don't need federal police to collect tariff revenue. Exactly. One of the things I was thrilled with was Congressman Massey, Thomas Massey, one of the foremost liberty-focused members of Congress. He tweeted out in response to President Trump's pitch that he was very intrigued. And this is great. If you can get the most hardcore libertarians excited about a tax, that should tell you a lot about where we're headed. So again, back to ancient times, I make the point of I love this picture. This is the Colossus of Rhodes. Our ports were such special places. You go to Charleston, South Carolina. The customs house is beautiful. That's where all the action was. All the revenue generation that supplied our national government and maintained our civilization was collected through tariffs. Low compliance costs. I remember I took tax in law school. I had a great professor, and at the very beginning, you talk about the theory of tax. And one of the problems with income tax is it relies on everybody thinking that everybody else is playing by the rules. The moment people start to think, okay, they're cheating, I'm a sucker if I'm not cheating. And the whole system falls apart. You see this in countries like Greece. And it just undermines faith. I mean, how do we all feel about the 6 biggest pharmaceutical companies paying no corporate income tax? Right? You get the sense the system is rigged and it's cancerous to a nation. It doesn't happen in tariffs. I'm going to be whipping you through some tariff schedules as we go through the history and evolution of cattle and beef tariffs. So I just wanted to appreciate how old the tariff schedule is. This is it. Traders would go up to a port. This is the tariff of Palmyra from 137 AD, and it was just there. It was all fair. It was written for everyone could see. This is the tariff that's owed on the products, and the assessment was happening there. And in ancient times, if you saw a caravan show up at a beach or through some mountain pass, they all knew that was smuggling, right? They knew. So everyone knew what a tax cheat was, and because it was always immediately visible. And I'm going to say one more note before we get to the history of cattle and beef tariffs, but you're always going to hear, oh, tariff is just a tax on the consumer, and it's going to be wildly inflationary. No. Sales tax is that. A tariff is a tax on merchandise coming through our ports of entry. And I love this. This was a big narrative violation, you could say, in 2019, after President Trump imposed the 25% tariffs on about, 40% of what China sends us. Target sent out an open letter to all their suppliers saying, you eat the tariff. And it's exactly like President Trump predicted. President Trump said China would pay the tariff. China did pay the tariff. And we're generating now $50 billion a year. Nobody talks about that other than President Trump, but we're now making $50 billion a year in China tariffs. And that's about what Americans pay in gas tax, and it's about what the bottom half of Americans pay in federal income tax. So just with those tariffs alone that China is paying, we could eliminate income tax on the bottom 50% of payers. All right. So this was our first Tariff Act, passed July 4th, 1789. And Section 1, the first sentence, it lays out the dual purpose of tariffs, revenue and protection. That's not how we think about tariffs nowadays. Nowadays, tariffs are all about punishing some wrongdoing, or you broke some rule, so we're going to hit you with a tariff. This is totally out of the American tradition and how tariffs were used throughout civilization. So revenue and protection. So I will say, though, in 1789, agriculture was a little overlooked. You had they listed specific tariffs, like 1 cent, 6 cents per pound, what have you. But cattle and beef weren't even mentioned, and so they just fell into the 5% catch-all tariff. If anyone knows about the history of U.S.-Canada beef cattle trade, I'd love it, because I do feel like there must have been cattle going across the border, but nonetheless, we won't see a cattle tariff for several decades. So 1816, what happened right before 1816? The Napoleonic Wars. Okay, we were a very weak trading nation in the 1780s and the 1790s. We were still totally dependent on trade with Europe, sending them raw goods and importing everything manufactured. The Napoleonic Wars, they cut us off from trade. So we had to learn to start making things for ourselves, and that happened. When the Napoleonic Wars ended, what immediately happens is we start getting flooded, especially in apparel goods, textile and apparel, and Britain in the British Parliament, they were openly talking about dumping and ruining American textile mills. And so Congress came together 1816, and it was sort of the first, you call it protective tariff. They were really getting more into the protection and not just revenue side, and focused on apparel, clothing. And so you can see I've highlighted the 25% on woolen manufacturers, but again, no reference for cattle or beef or even raw wool. So they were now in this 15% catch-all. So the catch-all went from 5 to 15% unless you were listed. Okay, Henry Clay, 1824. I spoke about him a bit last year, but I got to reiterate. I think he's one of the most important American statesmen. So in March 1824, he's Speaker of the House, and he is the father of the protective tariff. And he explained that we're never going to be able to grow ourselves become prosperous relying on export markets. And this is so important in agriculture. Less so for you. You're just trying to hold on to what you can of your own market. But in agriculture more broadly, the fear that our opponents will always put in will say, well, if we lose export markets, we're going to collapse. Henry Clay, he was confronting that exact same argument from tobacco and cotton growers in 1820s, and he said, forget about it. And he went through commodity by commodity. So here, beef. The United States exported less beef in 1823 than we did in 1803, despite tremendous growth in our population. You just cannot. Europe will only buy when they have to buy from us, and otherwise they'll buy local. And that's what he said. Europe will not abandon her own agriculture to foster ours. Henry Clay was the #1 agricultural champion in trade policy. And if we don't take care of our farmers and provide the home market for them, the United States market for beef should be your market and nobody else's. That's what he understood, and he made that point. And if we screwed that up, it'd be our ruin. So we've got now the first beef tariff, 2 cents per pound. Anyone know what the beef tariff is today? 1 cent per kilogram. Okay, so yeah, we've not come very far. 1824, 2 cents per pound. He's on a roll. 1828, this is the so-called, you might have heard it framed incorrectly as the tariff of abominations, but this is, Henry Clay and the Whigs, they're really doubling down. And what I really appreciate here is now they're taking care of the whole supply chain. So we've got extraordinary tariffs on wool garments, but they took care of the ranchers as well. And so on raw wool, we had 4 cents per pound. They made it 4 cents and 40%. If you want to be a tariff nerd, we call that a compound tariff. So ad valorem, 40% or 50, and ad valorem is percentage of the value. Specific tariff is like dollars or cents per pound. Compound is both. So pretty impressive. That's a thoroughly protective compound tariff. You might have remembered your history books. It did not go over well, especially with southern cotton exporters. And so we had the whole nullification crisis. Andrew Jackson's president. We come up with the compromise tariff of 1832. So that wool tariff protection is eliminated. Country starts to get poorer. Tariff Act of 1842. We bring it back, 2 cents per pound, 20% cattle, and then 20% tariff on beef. In 1842, Henry Clay warned, this is just something to keep in mind. I love this line. It is evident that on the ad valorem principle, it is the foreigner who virtually fixes the actual amount of the duty paid. So when you're talking to your members of Congress about tariffs, I urge you, think in cents per pound. I think 70 cents per pound. That's inflation adjusted as to what we spent for most of the 19th century. Let's start there. But that's better than saying, oh, well, they'll have 15%, because 15% of what? The value? Well, who's to say what the value is? For cattle, we should have a reference price at a very minimum. If we're going to do that, we should just say, don't let the importer claim what the value is. And that's what Henry Clay warned about here. We need that lesson more than ever today. So 1846, this is Democrats. They were more the trading tariff revenue party. So they took away all the specific tariffs and just went to ad valorem, 20% on beef and cattle. 1857, we're actually awash in cash. We're still making all federal revenues from tariffs, but Democrats pushed the beef and cattle tariff back down to 15%. And then we had the Civil War. So a lot of people don't know about this, about President Lincoln, but he was a huge disciple of Henry Clay. President Lincoln campaigned for Henry Clay. Henry Clay was a U.S. Senator from Kentucky in 1842. and Lincoln campaign forum. So President Lincoln, and you can see there, in the protective tariff law. That's principles of the of the Grand Old Party, protective tariff law. So Lincoln was a protectionist, proudly so, and in 1861, now that the South is out of Congress, the moral tariff is packed. We're off to the races. The rest of the 19th century is going to be under a firmly Republican protective tariff. Principles of the Republican Party. I love this poster, and you can see in the West, appropriately, protection to our farms and mines. On the right, to our trades. Golden Era. This is all from a great article by Pat Buchanan. But 1869 to 1900, we became the superpower of the world. By 1900, we were the world's factory. And even though we had this really high protective tariff, our wages and population exploded. This is, Canada is obviously the #1 source for, historically, for beef and cattle imports. I love this because in 1867, Canada was just there was 4 different Canadian provinces. They were spread out along the border. And they figured we're just looking towards annexation. And there was a lot of loyalists, especially after throughout the 19th century, a lot of British loyalists, the people migrating to Canada, they wanted to stay loyal to the crown, but they knew we're not going to make it. We have an economy. So in July 1st, 1867, British North America, the various provinces came together, formed the nation of Canada, and copied Henry Clay's plan. And they called it the national policy. And the whole thing was, we're not going to trade with the United States. Now imagine how difficult that must have been if you were a rancher in Manitoba or Saskatchewan on the frontier. There's no railway yet out east. They were relying on exporting to the United States. And so that was a really big deal and a huge gamble. But Canada copied the Clay Plan with the tariffs, and they built their own transcontinental railway. And this is a Canadian ad to farmers marketing the national policy. And at the top there's the farmer. So under the national policy, they've got the home market and their own industry to feed, and they're wealthy. But under the free trade, you can't count on exports. You see, the farmer is destitute, his horses are starving. And so I love it that Canada and the United States, great friends, great allies, but we became wealthy together by not trading and working on our respective home markets. Democrats were still the party of free trade. I just love these before and after. I showed them last year too, but I can't get enough of them. So on the right, the Republican protective platform, you see the kids are well fed, the smokestacks are all churning, things are being made. On the left, under the Democrats' free trade platform, the kids are hungry. There's only one person happy on the left, and that's John Bull. He's the British Uncle Sam, and the big fat guy with the top hat. And you can see he's, negotiating with a destitute Uncle Sam. So the McKinley Tariff of 1890. So William McKinley, this is before he's president. He's now chairman of Ways and Means. That's the committee in the House of Representatives that sets tariff policy. And Americans at this point are far wealthier than Europeans. And they attributed that to, we've got this protective tariff, and we've got a system of free enterprise. Free trade is great within the United States. Right? We don't want to go back to the Articles of Confederation, which was every colony having its own tariffs. That's not good. I could say a line too, like the Holy Roman Empire. Every little town had its own tariff policy, and the effect of that was to just actually give a monopoly to one little artisan manufacturer. No, we want competition, but you have to have competition within a nation. You can't just have free, open competition globally with every wretched indentured servant around the world. McKinley understood that. So we have cattle tariffs now, and they're not in the catch-all. Cattle under 1 year old, $2 a head. If the cattle was older than 1 year, $10 a head. I believe $2 a head adjusted for inflation. I've got this later in my deck, but I think that's like $68 now or something. So strikes me as meaningful. Beef, 2 cents per pound, and meat extract, they were already dealing with this back then, 35 cents per pound. So just whatever that is, we don't want it. again, another before and after. So this is now McKinley running for president, and you can see the ruin that the free trade Democrat tariff brought. I mean, this is an exaggeration, but under the he's marketing under his 1892 tariff. You can see all the sheep. Right there's the rancher with his whole flock. Everything's healthy. The smokestacks are turning. Now, 1904. I mean, we at this point we're the world's factory, and there's a lot of within the Republican Party. There's a new line of attack against tariffs, and because we've got these giant monopolies, including Packers, and the original idea for the tariffs had been we got to incubate these our infant industries and grow them. Well, now we have the most powerful industries in the world. What are we protecting them for? And antitrust law had just been invented. We still have all of these giant monopolies, and the people are not being well served by them. So you've got Teddy Roosevelt famously in the progressive split in the Republican Party. So it's all kind of falling apart now. Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act of 1909. It's kind of like the Republicans are backing away now. And here we have, for ranchers, I guess we're all right. Cattle over 1 year. Now I've inflation adjusted these. $120 per head if valued under 448, or if it's under $448, then, or over. Sorry, it was 27.5%. So still a lot better than we have today. 1912, Teddy Roosevelt ran as an independent, split the vote, and the Democrats swept Congress, and Woodrow Wilson becomes president. This was a disaster for America and a disaster for all planet Earth. It didn't take long. They wiped out all the beef and cattle tariffs, and the Packers immediately, even in 1913, they're importing beef from Australia and Argentina. Another news article about beef trust starts Argentine imports. So you've been in this fight for a long time, and I'm afraid on the losing end of it. Now, 1920 though, so World War I happens. That immunizes us from a lot of the damage of the tariffs being wiped out in 1912, which is also, by the way, what birthed our income tax that we still have today, created the IRS and all of that. So what you can see here on the schedule, it's, I'll get the laser pointer, but under the 1913 tariff, it's everything, all meat, all the cattle, it's all moved down to free. But then 1922, the Fordney-McCumber tariff, we're back up to the 2.5 cents, 3 cents per pound. Now there's a little story I'll quickly omit here. I think this is where we're at. I think we're in 1919 right now. In the 1920 general election, the Republicans swept. They took Congress and the presidency. And this is how quickly they acted. They campaigned on restoring the protective tariff. Okay? They won the election, and March 1921, Congress has been in session for like 6 weeks. This is how organized they were. They passed the Emergency Tariff Act of 1921, specifically for agriculture. So they didn't waste any time. Harding signed it. They brought back all of the agricultural protective tariffs. And that's because in 1919, farmers across the country, it was a horrible year. It was like the #1 issue was the collapse in farm prices. So let's hope we can get the 119th Congress, which starts in January, to act with the same urgency that we saw in 1920-21. Now we've got a new element working against us, though. We were so successful, right? We are after World War I, for the first time in our history, we became a net creditor nation. Okay, so now the rest of the world owes us money, and this brought a whole new element to attacking the tariffs that were protecting your industry and so many others. Banks who are lending money all over the world and generating IOUs in dollars, as well as our biggest multinationals, U.S. Steel, was, they're selling around the world now. We're the world's factory, but they're getting accounts receivable priced in dollars. These countries don't even have any dollars to pay us back. So this is a whole new element now attacking our tariffs. People that want to facilitate imports from other countries so that those countries have dollars to pay back our global enterprise. This man was Cordell Hull, and he's a Democratic chairman of the DNC, and he's openly talking like this in the 1920s. He says, "Oh, Republicans' protective tariff, it's going to cost our banks millions of dollars." This guy would go on to undo our country. Cordell Hull, he's 1931. He's already advocating World Trade Pact. Woodrow Wilson. I mean, I should have included his quote. 1912. He wanted you all to be in direct competition with everyone in the world. He thought that you were entitled to zero protection versus cattlemen in Central America or wherever. So 1930, this would be the last time Congress would pass a tariff. It's known as the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, Tariff Act of 1930, and you got to, wasn't this nice? We got you up to 3 cents or 55 cents today per pound on beef. This was Vice President Curtis. And he openly campaigned. He's like, we're taking care of ranchers, and we're raising the tariff. Unfortunately, with the Great Depression, which was a monetary crisis, the Democrats sweep, and FDR is elected. He brings in our nemesis, Cordell Hull, as the Secretary of State. Cordell Hull is a Tennessee congressman before that. He doesn't like FDR. FDR doesn't like him. But it was a concession to the Southern Democrats that he'd give the Secretary of State job. And the Southern Democrats, these were the same contingent that were always export focused. Okay, and so they wanted lower tariffs. So 1934, this was a historical moment. Congress passed most of its constitutional tariff authority and transferred it to the president. We've had nothing but bad presidents on trade policy until President Trump. Every single president left us in a worse state. They gaslit everybody. They lied in 1934. They said, this is about getting reciprocity for our exports, but that wasn't what it was about. We never got reciprocity. Every time we did a trade deal with a country in the 1930s, and we agreed to, say, cut the tariff on an agricultural product, we extended that. We didn't just extend that tariff cut for that one country. We did it for the whole world. It's called unconditional most favored nation. It's a total scam, and it didn't take long at all for protective tariffs to be wiped out. So this was a free trade agreement with Canada in 1935 that took a lot of agricultural tariffs. There's another one with another signing ceremony with Brazil in 1935. And between 1934 and 1946, we did 29 of these trade deals, which were just excuses for Cordell Hull to cut tariffs. The other country was irrelevant. It's about getting dollars into those other countries so banks can get repaid. We still have, this old guard of the Republican Party. This is Senator Taft from Ohio. He's warning about what's happening. 1947, the GATT is created, and this is what we've been living under today. This is global rules-based. The GATT is still around. The WTO administers it now. And look which country has the lowest global tariffs, 3.4%, USA. That's our average now. We're the absolute lowest. It was never about reciprocity. It was about giving imports unfettered access to the US market so banks could collect US dollars. What happens to ranchers in the 1950s? Cattle imports surge, beef imports surge. Imports go from having 1.6% of the market in 1956 to 11% in 1963. And this is where you had a very rare victory. You're pleading, this is with the Kennedy administration. And then in 1964, Congress knows we've got to deal with the ranchers. We're in a lot of trouble. So they start to propose these import quotas. You all recognize these are half measures, so you don't accept them. You keep on fighting. And your Western legislators, I mean, I wish we had the same legislators you had in the 1960s today, because they did a good job. President Johnson is doing everything he can to placate you. He's like, we promise we're gonna get you some more export markets. And well, we know from Henry Clay that never works. So, but Congress is going to pass a beef quota over the State Department and over the Johnson administration's wishes. So the Meat Import Control Act is passed. State Department's upset, and what it does is it says it's going to keep imports at the same percentage of production as during the 1959 to 1963 period. So, sounds pretty good. It was a good victory, but there was too many options for presidents to do side deals, and every president, you know, they're getting these daily briefings. They've proven that up and until President Trump, they will throw you under the bus if there's some sort of international security situation that they think is warranted. If some other country says, okay, you can put this base here, but we want more access to your market, they will take that deal every time. And that's what happened, unfortunately, with the Meat Import Act of 1964, is presidents kept on issuing waivers and allowing more beef in. It finally boiled to a head under President Ford, and he promises October 30th, 1974 in Sioux City, he's like, okay, we're going to finally enforce this act that you won a decade ago. But there's still too many loopholes. 40 million pounds of beef from Australia sneaking in through Puerto Rico. And Ford has to overcome his own cabinet. These are declassified memorandums. You know, his own cabinet wasn't on board, and they were really embarrassed. They wanted to work with Australia as a security partner. They didn't want to care about you. President Carter, inflation. Oh, and this is something we really have to deal with today. Oh, and we've got inflation. Let's get more imports. This is our major problem today. Reagan, same deal. His own. This is another declassified memorandum, subject meat import quota. All members of Reagan's cabinet council expressed a distaste for the imposition of a meat import quota. So, you know, I hate to say it, but we can't have many heroes in the trade space. Getting up to NAFTA, Bill's covered NAFTA phenomenally well, so I won't go over all of it, and also for you guys, most of the damage was done before NAFTA, or in parallel to the Uruguay round. Your tariffs have never been updated for inflation. That's not just you, that's all agriculture. Agriculture, we still have all these specific tariffs that are about 1 cent per kilogram, or 2 cents per kilogram. That's 1930s prices, never adjusted for inflation. Florida fruits and vegetables, really hard hit. Boy, seafood producers, I can't believe we have anyone producing seafood in America anymore. But NAFTA blew it open, especially for, we had a lot of quota systems, and those all went out the window. So, and that's what happened with beef too. We still have a beef quota, but those quotas are not filled for Mexico, or for most countries, Australia. The quota levels are so high now that they're not even filled. And then what's happened to so many agricultural groups, like sugar was the last man standing, they just lost their quota altogether from Mexico. So Mexico is now a big back door for a lot of agricultural commodities where anything can come through. I want to make this point about retaliation. They're going to say, we can't help you because our other agricultural exports are going to be hit. Cereal grains, we're a major exporter in cereal grains. Like we're a powerhouse. You know, we've fats, proteins, we don't care about that, but refined carbs, we export that. So when President Trump put his China tariffs in, he said we're going to have these. There was so much fear mongering about the retaliatory tariffs, and sure enough, China, which was a major buyer of our soybean exports fell 74% in 1 year, from 12 billion to 3 billion. But China actually needed our soybeans, so they couldn't maintain it. So we're back to record exports of all these cereal grains, and we kept the tariff. And by the way, we made so much money from the tariffs that we were able to keep all the farmers whole for that retaliatory period. And then there's the last piece of good news. This is new since last year. This is an article I wrote just in March. Congress is back in the tariff bill business. After a 90-year hiatus, we're coming back. So these 6 senators have all introduced tariff bills. And second from the left there is Senator Cassidy from Louisiana. I told you shrimpers, less than 10% of the shrimp we eat in America now is American shrimp. It's almost all imports. Senator Cassidy from Louisiana, he's had enough, and he legislated a 40% tariff on Indian shrimp, which was the main source of the problems. So that's huge. He's a member of Senate Finance Committee. This hasn't been done in 90 years. Hasn't been passed yet. We got to get some. McConnell's leaving, so hopefully new blood. Things will be getting better. But this is just the dawn of a new era, and this is where you have to be talking to your senators. So, conclusion. My advice to you: talk to Congress. Don't rely on any one president to save you. You get that. Get it, and don't accept them. Don't accept arguments about retaliation. So, I've used up my time. So but thank you very much, and please come find me if you have any questions.